Friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the press briefing on issue of COVID-19 origin tracing held by the Chinese Embassy in South Africa. First of all, please allow me to take this opportunity to thank all our friends for your continuous and precious support for the embassy. As the pandemic continues to ravage different parts of the world, there has been growing calls and urgent actions of nations across the globe working together to counter the scourge. However, in total disregard of the overall international cooperation against COVID-19, the United States has heightened its ongoing global campaign exploiting the COVID-19 origin tracing with the political manipulation. The US even authorized its intelligence community to finish relevant investigations within 90 days. Recently, the US intelligence community has compiled a so-called report on the origins of COVID-19. To justify that, the US also issued a statement to slander and attack China. Today, Chinese ambassador to South Africa, His Excellency Mr. Chen Xiaodong, will elaborate on the merits of the relevant issues and answer questions from the journalists. Now, I give the floor to the ambassador.
Thank you. Friends from media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for joining us for today's press briefing. On August 27th, the US Office of the Director of National Intelligence released the so-called key takeaways of the summary of assessment on COVID-19 origins. US President Joe Biden also issued a statement on this matter. The US spared no efforts to hide up the so-called Wuhan lab leak and slander that China withhold information, refuse to cooperate and obstruct international investigation. Those US slanders have low grounds. The US side is blatantly telling lies. The Chinese side opposes and condemns such moves. It's inherently anti-science for politicians and the intelligence community to trace the origins of viruses. The summary has nothing new in pinning the blame on China. What the US has done is a witch hunt that only looks for excuse in favor of their verdict, and that presumes China to be guilty. In doing so, the US holds science in contempt. They turn a blind eye to the loss of lives, and they undermine global solidarity against the virus. COVID origin is a major issue of science that scientists around the world, including China and South Africa, are studying very hard. Today, I would like to share with you all three aspects of observations on the science of origin tracing with all the facts and the evidence. First, the so-called Wuhan lab leak theory is full of loopholes. It's a complete fabrication. The P4 lab of the Wuhan Institute of Virology is a China-France government project. It strictly follows international standards all the way from design, construction to management. There are strict protective facilities and measures, and the lab has been operating safely and stably since it opened in 2018. The local government in China got the first COVID report on December 27th of 2019. They got test samples of the first batch of COVID patients on the 30th. Before that, the WIV had never accessed, stored, or studied the virus whatsoever. The institute has never designed or manufactured the virus, not to mention to leak it. It has never conducted any coronavirus gain of function research. Even up till now, not a single staff member of the WIV constructed the virus. In March this year, a WHO team consisting of 34 experts from China and around the world did a 28-day study in Wuhan. And WHO officially released a joint WHO-China study on COVID-19 origins. The study concluded that a lab leak is extremely unlikely. This has become the general consensus of the international academic community. Also, since last year, many well-known experts have published articles in prestigious medical journals, such as The Lancet, to refute the conspiracy theory of a lab leak with solid evidence. Among them are many American experts, such as NIH Director Francis Collins. Many findings show that the virus had emerged in many places around the world long before the virus hit and got reported in China. Earlier positive samples are still being identified. For example, in November 2019, multiple skin biopsies from an Italian woman revealed the virus in situ hybridization reactivity. Genetic material of the virus has also been detected in wastewater samples collected from a city in Brazil. From December 13th, 2019 to January 17th, 2020, 9 states in the US reported a total of 106 archive samples of routine blood donations that tested positive for COVID antibodies. Second, China is open and transparent on origin tracing cooperation. We have nothing to hide. The Chinese side twice invited WHO in July last year and March this year, respectively, for origin tracing in China. And we fully supported WHO expert team's work. During the trips, the Chinese side made every effort to organize and coordinate among relevant departments to meet the requirement of WHO experts on their visits. A number of experts on the team say that they visited all the places they wanted to visit and met with everyone they wanted to meet. During the team's visit to China, the Chinese side presented all the key raw data in greater detail. These include patients' data from 174 earlier cases. The foreign experts also repeatedly made it clear that the team had access to a huge amount of data and information. They spoke highly of China's open, transparent, and responsible attitude. They said that China's openness was unexpected, and the result of the Wuhan visit exceeded expectations. The global COVID-19 origin tracing cooperation between WHO and China and its research practice provide a model for similar cooperation in other countries around the world. Third, the timeline of China's COVID-19 response proved that China has no reservations about sharing information with the world. According to international practice, it's customary for countries to have strict rules for the confirmation of infectious disease. China's law on the prevention and control of infectious disease has strict approval procedures and regulations for the reporting, verification, and release of infectious disease outbreaks. On December 27th, 2019, Dr. Zhang Jixian, director of the Department of Respiratory and Critical Care Medical at the Hubei Provincial Hospital of Integrative Medicine, was the first to report 3 cases of unknown pneumonia. This is the first time a suspicious case was reported by a local department in China. On the same day, the Wuhan CDC conducted epidemiological investigation and testing of relevant patients. On December 30th, the Wuhan Health Commission issued an urgent notice on reporting the treatment of the unknown pneumonia. On December 31st, the Wuhan Health Commission issued a briefing on the current pneumonia outbreak in the city. On the same day, China notified the WHO representative office in China of information and pneumonia cases of unknown origin in Wuhan. Since January 3rd of 2020, China started to timely and actively share the COVID information with WHO and countries, including the US. From January 3rd to February 3rd, China shared with the US information about the outbreak and China's response measures 30 times. China already completed the identification and genome sequencing of the virus on January 7th, 2020, and already shared genome sequencing of the virus with WHO and other countries on January 11th. On January 10th, the WIV and other institutions already developed COVID detection kits and started developing COVID vaccines and medicines. What I want to say as a reminder today is that from January 3rd, 2020, when China notified the US of COVID, to March 13th, when the US declared a national emergency, a simple process like this took 70 days. I guess all of us are very clear about what the US has done during the 70 days. Friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, some US politicians are obsessed with stigmatizing the virus by associating it with certain countries and places. This move do nothing but politicizing COVID origin tracing. Those politicians also attempt to pressure WHO into conducting a so-called phase 2 investigation into China. In the name of origin tracing that should have been based on science, the US attempts to plant evidence to incriminate China. Whatever the US side says or does on origin tracing has turned into nothing but a farce and a terrible scandal for the international community. First, the US engages in political manipulation with ill intentions. Does the US really care about origin tracing? From the very start till now, US government leadership cares nothing about where the virus originates. What they want from all of this is to use origin tracing to smear and attack China and to increase bargaining power with China. Their evil intention could not be more obvious. If the US really care about origin tracing, they should stop blaming others, focus on controlling the virus and saving life at home, and invite WHO to carry out investigation into the Fort Detrick base and the University of Northern Carolina. The US side is using origin tracing to practice hegemony. They gather allies to launch public opinion warfare and made a lot of noise about how there is a Wuhan lab leak and how China should pay for it. When the US paid back the fees it owed to WHO, they made it as if it's a way of forcing WHO on a second investigation into China. The US is attempting to appear that they set the rules in origin tracing. All this fully exposes how the US is not tracing origins of the virus, but manipulating the situation. What they have done disrespect science, exacerbates the spread of COVID as well as the political virus, which is more dangerous. Second, the US ignores science and fixates on the presumption of guilty. Does the US know that origin tracing takes a long time? Many US scientists have took part in tracing the origins of Spanish flu, Ebola, and AIDS. Some of these cases still have not been solved even today, after more than a decade or even decades of tough research. However, with the COVID-19 pandemic, the US government has put political calculations, bullying, and arrogance about science. They blatantly demand that the intelligence community produce a report in just 90 days. The fact that intelligence agencies and politicians, rather than experts, are making investigation is in itself anti-science. It fully demonstrates that US side never intended to reach a scientific conclusion. They have already predetermined the outcome, just so they can pin the blame on China. In fact, the world knows all too well about the terrible track record of US intelligence community. For example, they once used a small tube of washing powder as so-called evidence of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. They are behind the so-called white helmet to produce fake videos of so-called chemical weapons attack in Syria. During a speech at Texas A&M University in 2019, former US Secretary of State and CIA Director Mike Pompeo said, "We lied, we cheated, we stole, we have entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment." Again, the US intelligence community have a terrible history of poor informants. The so-called origin tracing report they fabricated is by no means credible. Third, the US keeps on shifting blames to others without any bottom line morality. Does the US really care about COVID-19 response? President Biden spoke in his statement about taking every necessary precautions to prevent it from happening again. Ironically, with the most advanced medical equipment and the strongest capability in the world, the US has seen 38 million confirmed COVID cases and nearly 630,000 American lives have been lost to the virus. US number of newly confirmed cases daily still ranks the highest in the world, with only 4% of the world population. The US account for a staggering 18% of global positive cases. The US president also said he would continue to work with like-minded partners. In reality, the US and its ally has often blamed and created trouble for each other in their COVID response. The US also used ridiculous tricks to intercept its allies' response supply and hoarded staggering amounts of vaccines. Smearing China will not clear the name for the US. In order to divert the world from blaming the US for its terrible response, the US has constantly put out bizarre argument as holding China accountable. China needs to pay for it, and the lab leak in China. In essentials, they do all this only to cover up their own failure response. They plant evidence against China so as to serve their own selfish interest. Graham Allison, a well-known American scholar, said bluntly that during COVID, American politicians target China for nothing else but to avoid being held accountable for the failures in their own response. Fourth, the US willingly and knowingly choose to turn a blind eye to the call for justice. Has the US ever heard the universal call of the international community for science and justice? More than 80 countries have supported the joint WHO-China study and opposed politicizing this issue by writing to the WHO Director General, making statements or sending diplomatic notes. More than 300 political parties, social organizations, and think tanks from more than 100 countries and regions have submitted a joint statement to the WHO Secretariat. They support WHO in moving forward origin tracing study in a scientific, objective, and impartial manner. Professor Salim Karim, the leading South Africa epidemiologist and the former chair of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID, argued that the international community need to approach origin tracing in a scientifically rigorous way, rather than political posturing and finger point. Several WHO sources and researchers disclosed that whenever they expressed support for the joint WHO-China study, they were pressured from the US side. President Peter Daszak of the Eco Health Alliance and Australian virologist Daniel Addison are no exception. As the world's largest developed country, the US should have worked hard for global health security cooperation. On the contrary, the US has wantonly undermined global cooperation against COVID-19, disrupt origin tracing, and ignore calls from justice. That has not only cost the American people dearly, but also seriously damaged global cooperation against COVID and posed an unprecedented threat to global health security. Friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, China's position on origin tracing is consistent and clear. We approach it with an open, transparent, scientific, and cooperative attitude. First, origin tracing is about science. No country has a right to disregard life, politicize scientific issues, and smear other countries for political interest. Second, China has always supported and will continue to participate in science-based origin tracing. What we oppose is origin tracing that is politicized, that goes against WHO resolutions, and that disrespects the joint China-WHO study. Third, China WHO study must be respected and implemented by all parties, including WHO and its member states. Global origin tracing work should and can only be carried out on the basis of this study and not anything else. Friends from media, ladies and gentlemen, like all countries in the world, China is a victim of COVID-19. And we all hope to identify the source of this virus as soon as possible and stop its spread as early as possible. It's important for the international community to join hands to fight against not only COVID, but also the political virus. We need to jointly oppose the self-serving actions of the US through political manipulation, presumption of guilty, and blame shifting. We advise the US side there is no way out for political origin tracing, and that is essential for them to immediately return to the right path of science-based origin tracing and response cooperation. That is the expectation of the international community, and all in the interest of the American people, and also in the interest of the American people. Otherwise, they will only bring disgrace for themselves, dishonor themselves, and ended up harming their own interests and those of others. I thank you all.
Thank you, Ambassador. Just now, Ambassador Chen comprehensively elaborated China's position on the issue of origin tracing from a scientific point of view. The ambassador made it clear that China firmly opposes the collusion between US politicians and intelligence agencies to engage in anti-science reports, and calls on the US to abandon political manipulation, presumption of guilt, and shifting blame onto China, and return to the right track of science-based origin tracing and cooperating against pandemic. I believe this also represents the aspirations of all the people for justice in the world, including South Africa. And next, Ambassador Chen would like to answer your questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and please identify yourself before you ask the question. So now floor is open. Okay, I see Mr. Abbey from ICBC raised your hand. Okay, so I invite Mr. Abbey to ask the question.
Thank you so much for taking my question. I'm a freelance journalist who's also a columnist at SABC News Digital. My question to the ambassador after listening to him is, will this US report on origin tracing affect the US-China relations? And if so, how will that be? Thank you.
So, Mr. Abbey, thank you for your question. I have just revealed to all my friends in detail US tricks and their intentions in origin tracing. The US side move seriously impedes the already stalled exchanges and dialogue between the two countries, and further poisons the atmosphere of China-US relations. China firmly opposes this move. It needs to be noted that origin tracing is only one of the Biden administration's nasty tricks to suppress China. They also constantly high up Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Tibet, and human rights related issues. The Biden administration has basically inherited Trump's terrible run China policy. They still think of China as an imaginary enemy. They are intensifying containment, infiltration, subversions, smears, and attacks on China. The Biden administration's so-called competition, cooperation, and confrontation approach toward China is actually a blindfold for essentially containing and suppressing China. Confrontation and containment are for real, while cooperation is for expediency, and competition a discourse trap. While claiming to return to multilateralism, the US engaged in small circle and group politics. They pieced together the Quad mechanism, resurrected the Five Eyes Alliance, mobilized the G7, and created an anti-China alliance to block and contain China. This is nothing more than typical pseudo-multilateralism. The so-called rule-based international order preached by the US is in sense about using laws and rules of the US and its GAN members as international law. They are used to contain and suppress other countries. The US has long pursued a policy of hegemony and power politics. They are the real cause of global trouble. The US launched war in the Middle East against Iraq and Syria and instigated Arab Spring in Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and many other countries. This conflict resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths and millions of people displaced. The 20 years war in Afghanistan ended with the hasty withdrawal of US troops, leaving a mess full of loopholes. It resulted in more than 100,000 of Afghan civilian casualties and the displacement of more than 10 million people. This is not only a US military, political, and moral failure, but also a profound revelation that hegemony, militarism, and power politics have no support whatsoever. The US must be condemned and held to account for their endless war crimes. US behavior of starting wars and leaving behind messes once again prove that the US is completely untrustworthy and unreliable. The US also has a bad track record in Africa. The historical slave trade caused the death of a large number of Black people. The US has a long history of systematic racial discrimination against people of African descent. One example is that there is still no justice in the recent Moyeni case. The US has long interfered in the international affairs of African countries, including South Africa, using their military and sanction strategies to dictate the internal affairs of African countries. They overthrew the legitimate regime in Libya by force and imposed unilateral economic sanctions on Zimbabwe, Sudan, and other countries wantonly. Back to source tracing, the US side engaged in political games, presumptions of guilty and blame shifting on this matter, and seriously interferes with and undermines international cooperation in response and origin tracing. Their move have been universally opposed by the international community. China's policy towards the US is firm and clear. We are committed to handling China-US relations in accordance with the principles of non-conflict, non-confrontation, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation. The Chinese people are not afraid of evil forces. We are not a people to be tampered with. We have everything it takes to safeguard our national sovereignty, security, and development interests. And we have the strong support of the developing countries, including South Africa. I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. And let's continue. And there are more questions.
Ambassador Chen, it's Brian Sokutu here from the Citizen newspaper. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has recently made a reference to the US Fort Detrick and the University of Carolina. This as China has submitted papers to the WHO, as well as open letter signed by over 25 million Chinese citizens calling for an investigation into the Fort Detrick base. Could you further elaborate on China's position?
Okay, okay, please identify yourself, please. Which agency, which newspaper are you from?
My name is Brian Sokutu from the Citizen newspaper.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your good question. This need to be no blind spot or double standards in COVID-19 origin tracing. It's crucial to always look at oneself before pointing fingers at others. The international community, including the American public, all raised their serious concern over Fort Detrick and the University of Northern Carolina. China did submitted 2 non-papers to WHO on this one. This is in line with public sentiment. They also reflect the common aspiration of the international community and justice itself. First, as is known to all, Fort Detrick is the home base of US warfare activities. The US Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Disease is the most prominent entity in the base. The institute, which has long been engaged in coronavirus research and modifications, suffered a serious safety incident and was shut down in 2019. Closely following that, there are outbreaks of disease with symptoms similar to COVID-19 within the US. This was also a petition by the people in March 2020 to the White House demanding that the US government disclose information about the base. The US government, however, has never responded to any of these issues. Second, the United States is the largest funder and implementer of coronavirus research worldwide. Professor Ralph Barick's team at the UNC is authoritative on this type of research, and they have long had extremely sophisticated capability for coronavirus synthesis and modification. From January 2015 to June 2020, the UNC reported 28 safety incidents involving genetically engineered microorganisms to the National Institute of Health. 6 of these cases involve coronavirus. Many had been genetically modified, and a total of 8 researchers may have been infected. An investigation of Professor Barrick's team and its laboratory would help clarify whether such research has and will produce and lead the COVID-19 virus. Third, the United States has the highest level of biomilitary activities in the world. The international community is concerned about both Fort Detrick in the US and its over 200 biolaboratories outside the United States. The international community knows nothing about whether the relevant activities are consistent with the Biological Weapons Convention. A security incident at any of the many US overseas labs would have catastrophic consequences for the whole world. While calling for the investigation of other countries' labs, the United States is precisely the only country that opposed building a multilateral biological verification mechanism. Even if there is not any problem on COVID-19 origin tracing, the US needs to give the international community an explanation. Is it normal for the US to keep covering up sins and dodging legitimate questions from the international community? Is it fair that the US remains closed off to origin tracing in their own place, but points at China again and again? This cannot be more of a typical case of US guilty conscience. China's request to investigate Fort Detrick site and the UNC is not remove the impact of US political interference in origin tracing and create favorable conditions for science-based source tracing. If the US side insists that lab leaks cannot be ruled out, it would be good for the US to set an example first by inviting WHO to Fort Detrick and the UNC for origin tracing investigation. The US should not be a blind spot in global origin tracing, and the international community is very keen to see whether an origin tracing investigation into the US will be played out or not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. Just now, Ambassador has answered 2 questions from the local media, and this time I would like to give the chance to a Chinese media. Okay, I see the Xinhua News Agency. Some Chinese media has some questions. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Tian, yeah, from Economic Journal. Okay, what's your question? Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Ambassador, and so thank you for your detailed introduction. And I have a question that we have noted that several organizations such as ANC and the SACP have recently issued a statement on COVID-19 origin tracing. A number of government officials, experts, and academics in South Africa has also recently spoken out actively to call for a comprehensive reflection upon COVID-19 and oppose politicizing origin tracing. What is your comment on this? Thank you.
Ms. Chen, thank you for your question. Recently, South Africa political parties, experts, and scholars, and various communities have been actively speaking out by issuing statements, giving interviews, and writing articles on this matter. The support is a strong voice against politicizing, stigmatizing, and ideologizing origin tracing. I wish to share 4 aspects of their calls for justice. First, they call for science-based origin tracing. They called on the international community to uphold science, objectivity, and impartiality, and to maintain the scientific and rigorous nature of origin tracing. Second, they oppose politicizing origin tracing. They firmly oppose individual countries using origin tracing as a tool to politically attack other countries, especially China. Nothing undermines global solidarity against COVID-19 more than this. Third, they commend China's active cooperation with the world on origin tracing. They endorse the conclusion of the joint China-WHO study, including the conclusion that a lab incident was extremely unlikely. Fourth, they believe that the virus originates in many places around the world, and that global origin tracing is essential. South Africa suffered from associating COVID-19 variants with certain countries. Calling the Beta variant first identified in South Africa, the South Africa variant is similar to Trump calling COVID the China virus, and the US intelligence agencies wantonly high up the Wuhan lab leak theory. Various South Africa communities unanimously oppose and reject this practice. China and South Africa are both responsible countries that stand with principles. Our 2 countries are both leaders in international cooperation against COVID-19. China is ready to further work with South Africa to safeguard the scientific and the serious nature of origin tracing, resist politicizing this issue, oppose political manipulation, and promote global cooperation against COVID-19. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. As Ambassador has some other arrangements, so this is the end of the Q&A session. And if you have any question, you may send it to the embassy via email, and you could find the contact information on the meeting notice. The Ambassador will be very willing to answer your question. And after the meeting, we will circulate the text of Ambassador's briefing and the record of the Q&A among the media friends as soon as possible. And and you are very welcome to use it for your reporting. And thank you again for participating in this event. And thank you very much for your valuable support to the Chinese Embassy in South Africa. Have a good day and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye.